Yay! I believe we are live today. Welcome to Hoot Livestream, episode 28. We're going to discuss what's new in Istio 1.14. Istio just turned 5, and the community release 1.14. You want to know what's new with the release? Today, I am so excited to discuss the Istio 1.14 release with Faseela. Welcome to the live stream, Faseela. Can you quickly introduce yourself for the audience?
Thank you, Lin. Hello, I'm Faseela. I work as a cloud native software developer at Ericsson Software Technology, which is Ericsson's open source software development division. I primarily work on prioritizing Ericsson's requirements in the open source communities in the 5G core area. And my work majorly focuses on Istio and Envoy at the moment. And I started with Istio contribution in the early 1.14 or late 1.13 release time frame. I'm extremely happy and excited that I'm having this session with Lin, who is one of the masterminds in Istio community, and actually really delighted that my contributions were recognized even in such a short time frame of work in the community. Thanks a lot for this opportunity, Lin.
Awesome, Faseela. I'm so excited to have you because you are literally the first woman guest speaker for the Hood. And also you contribute quite a few really interesting features to Istio 1.14. So I'm really look forward to learn from you today and, watch your live demo. So I'm so excited. Before we get to the episode, I'd like to quickly discuss the news for this week. So we already discussed about Istio 1.14, which we will dive into really quickly after the news. And the biggest news, I think, for the week is Broadcom to acquire VMware for $61 billion in cash and stock. Now that a lot of people are thinking IBM acquired Red Hat for 30 plus billion sounds very cheap. I feel pretty bad for our friends at VMware because I've heard rumors about, resource reduction with this news. So good luck to everyone on that. We just did a IstioCon recap at the Istio meetup, I think was a week ago. So if you missed the IstioCon, check out the key takeaways from me when I presented to you the Istio community meetup. Phenomenal feedback of IstioCon, by the way. Thank you for everyone who put in the survey for IstioCon. We got 4.5 ratings. Really, really cool. I would also like to remind folks about our next Hoot episode. Well, we are going to come back and talk about eBPF and why you want to put eBPF application to Bumblebee and walk through a tutorial with live demo on how to do that. In fact, I'm going to have Christian coming back. If you remember Christian, he was on episode 20 where he talked about Helm and Istio 1.13. So he's going to teach us about eBPF. I am super excited about that. There will not be a Hood live stream on the 21st and 28th because I will be traveling to Austin and Boston. Very excited about my trip. Last not the least, I want to also mention this workshop of Cilium, where we introduce eBPF and Cilium with a certification option. I believe the workshop is in 1 day, 20 hours this Thursday. So if you have time, please join us and get a little bit of hands-on with eBPF along with Cilium. With that, that's the news of the week. I would love to ask Faseela, what's your contribution experience to Istio?
Yeah, as I told before, I started with Istio only like 1 or 2 releases before. But I would say that it has been one of the most or the smoothest open source experience so far for me. With the first release itself, I was able to do some good contributions to the project. Yeah, I should say that the Istio community is actually very supportive. Of course, open source is all about giving and taking. So when I had contributions to make, there were enough people in the community who supported me. And also Istio has very good documentation, which made the journey easier. So I started with some contributions like the software bill of materials, which got into 1.13, and then for 1.14, by that time, yeah, I used to really get a lot of help from different community members, and for 1.14, I was able to make bigger contributions. So for a very nice and uh, amazing experience, I would say.
That's wonderful to hear. We can't ask for better. Just the hood before, 2 hoods before this one, we had Max from HPE team, who also had a really pleasant experience contributing to Istio. So I'm just super delightful about this contributor experience, because that's one thing, we've heard some of the users have hard time. So we'll constantly improve the experience for the user. With that, let's pull out the release notes for Istio 1.14. So there are essentially 4 highlights of the release. Faseela, feel free to chime in anytime, because it's a live discussion
Yeah.
between you and me. So the first one is the spell runtime integration added to Istio. Thanks to our HPE team for their hard work on this. One thing really interesting about this is essentially enables spell to do attestation, right? So we've talked about this in our Hood episode with Max. So if you missed that, click on the video link here. You will be able to watch out our Hood and also follow the tutorial. It still also provides a good documentation for this, so you can configure your spell integration and install Istio for spell, and the main changes in the sidecar injector webhook. So I'm not going to go through the detail because we did a hood together 2-3 weeks ago. The only thing I would mention that we didn't cover at the hood is create federated registration entries. So this is very interesting if you have your maybe cluster using different trust domains. So you could potentially create federated trust domains through spell. So I personally haven't got this running, so I won't be able to show anything, but this is definitely catching my eye, because I know we have users using different trust domain for their cluster. The next highlight, I like to pass to Faseela to talk about the auto SNI support. Just in a nutshell, what is this feature?
Yeah, so SNI or server name indication is an extension to the TLS protocol, which can be used by a client to indicate which host is it's trying to connect to. So there were a lot of people who are interested in this particular feature because Envoy was already supporting this auto SNI, and which enabled automatic setting of SNI based on the host or authority header. So that is what exactly which we enabled using this auto SNI feature now in Istio. So with this, you no longer has to explicitly set the SNI in the destination rule when a sidecar has to talk to a service which is outside the mesh. So that's what auto SNI is about. But of course, currently it is with a feature flag, and you have to explicitly enable the feature flag to get the feature.
That's good to know. You have to explicitly enable it. Thank you, Faseela. The next highlight of the release is add support for configuring TLS version for Istio workloads. In case you're wondering why it's the Istio workload, because we already have this feature for the Istio Ingress Gateway for a couple of releases. So this particular feature to configure The TLS version, specifically the minimum TLS version, is for the sidecars running within Istio service mesh. There is a detailed documentation on that, which we will also show you a demo and cover some of the gotchas that you may run into, which I run into. The next highlight is the telemetry improvement, specifically around access logging. Many of our users actually been using exploring telemetry API, and then find out the configuration is a little bit limited. So the filter based on workload mode allows you to configure whether you want to see access log based on client side or server side, or you want to see both client and server, which is the default. So we're going to show a demo on this too. Last but not the least, upgrade 1.14, we always welcome you to fill out the survey. And then IstioCon wrap up, which we mentioned, the very high satisfaction score. With that, I like to go to the upgrade note, because this is normally the first thing, existing user would read. One thing, I want to highlight is our upgrade note is really, really short. Faseela, what do you think? I think it's the shortest upgrade note I've ever seen of the Istio project on a minor
Yeah,
release.
yeah,
Yeah.
it looks the same to me.
Yeah, essentially, I mean, the only changes is about this switch the protobuffer library, right, using Golang. And that's not a change impacting Istio user, right? It's more for people, or vendors importing Istio as a Go library. So most users won't be impacted. So that's the highlight for Istio 1.14. With that, I'd like to kind of for us to talk about, what else is interesting for the release. Faseela, is there anything you want to highlight besides auto SNI?
Yeah, we also did some other enhancements in the traffic management area. For example, it's not always possible to onboard all microservices in a cluster to the service mesh due to various reasons. Uh, so there are definitely cases where there are needs for services within the cluster, but outside the mesh to communicate to mesh internal services. So this was one of the most important use cases for us internally. And for this use case, actually it does not make much sense for the traffic to go via this egress gateway, and we wanted to reduce this additional hop. So currently Istio has a mechanism to realize this particular use case, but actually it requires a lot of complex configuration. We can use a destination rule by specifying the TLS key and certificate paths, and later mount these certificates explicitly using sidecar annotations for volume mounts. And to add to the overhead, this DR used to get applied to all the workloads, and this used to result in a lot of warnings and error messages in the workloads where these certificates were actually not present. So for 1.14 release, we added the workload selector support. Yeah, for destination rule. With this, it becomes easier to configure egress TLS settings for specific workloads instead of applying this destination rule globally. So this solves the initial problem of the client certificate settings going to, all the sidecars. And on top of this, the ability to configure credential name was added to DR, and this helps you to simplify the things further, and it makes it easier to use Kubernetes secrets for TLS settings instead of the need for specifying the certificates or key paths in DR and then mounting them explicitly. So a lot of configuration has been optimized like this.
Yeah, these are great simplification. Thanks to your contribution. Can I ask you something quickly? The workload
Yeah.
selector, that's on the client side, right? So it's selecting the workload on the client, not on the server side. Is that
Yes,
correct?
correct.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Anything else you interested in highlight?
Yeah, no, these are the things which we have majorly done, and yeah, this TLS maximum version, which you already discussed, is of yeah quite importance to us as well. So we were already planning to use the same thing.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, I guess from my perspective, when looking at the release notes, the first one, it's actually interesting that we added support for sending unready endpoints to Envoy, and it's interesting that this is actually this is enabled by default. So this is used for when you are slow start in mode in Envoy. So if you not use this, it probably makes sense to disable it, honestly, in my opinion, because sending unready endpoints to Envoy probably won't gain you much benefits if you're not using the slow start mode. The other thing, I guess, the IP table configuration. Sorry, were you going to say something?
No, we were also much interested in this thing. We wanted to try out this IP tables, include, exclude thing. Yeah.
Yeah, do you want to elaborate a little bit on this?
I have not used it, but yeah, at least from the title, people were saying like, yeah, this is something we should try out and see how.
Yeah, I guess will you also primarily plan to use it on VM?
Not really currently.
Okay, yeah, cool. Yeah, I agree. This is definitely interesting too. And we already discussed about these. I guess warning message. It's not. So I guess if you're using Envoy filter replace the virtual host, that's pretty cool also. And you can also configure proxy runtime. That's interesting. Let's see. I guess my favorite feature would be there was an issue about undeclared protocol like this one. I think it's related to issue causing traffic from a gateway with a service with undeclared protocol. So I would definitely recommend to disable protocol sniffing in production so that you kind of will declare your protocol always as be very explicit to tell Istio what protocol you use instead of having Istio to automatically detect that, which could be wrong and it could also cause performance concerns. So that's one thing I want to point out.
Yeah, there are some IPv6 fixes as well. Yeah, it looks like.
This one,
Yeah.
the IP, yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting one too. This one is very interesting. The default load balancer algorithm is actually changed from round robin to list request. So community, I believe Lin and Miller from Google actually done a bunch of testing, and to the end we find our list request actually outperforms round robin in all the cases that he runs. And so we made the decision, change to list request. We don't expect this to impact anybody, but if you do believe round robin works better for you, you can always explicitly specify that's the load balancer algorithm you want to use.
Okay. So hopefully that is part of the upgrade notes then.
You mean this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that it actually wasn't highlighted in the upgrade notice because we didn't expect it to impact anybody. But it's in the release notes. Just make a note on if it's impact anybody. Yeah. I guess the other thing I would say, this is pretty cool, right? If you use WASM plugin today, it can actually support image pool secrets now. So if you use a private repo, so that to pull your WASM module or WASM images, you can specify the pull secrets now. So that's very cool. And the telemetry side change, I think we talk about the workload mode. I guess one thing interesting is add environment variable to WASM extension. So another change is to addition to the WASM plugin API. For folks who are interested in run gateway as a daemon set, now it's possible with Helm. Previously, we had it possible with Istio, but not with Helm, so that's nice. And then we have a bunch of fixes. And I guess on the Istio side, I thought the adding support for ECDS was interesting. To show the extension config discovery service information. So if you're using WASM plugin, that's probably relevant to you. And then the cluster ID shows in the proxy status command. So that's very useful if you have multi-cluster. That's all I think interesting from my perspective. Anything else you want to highlight?
Nothing. No, but the telemetry part you are planning to give a demo, right?
Yes, and okay. Yeah. All right. If that's let's dive into the demo, Faseela. Let me stop sharing. So I'd love to see your demo about auto SNI.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will share screen and then probably you can tell me if it's all good. Are you able to see my two windows?
No.
At least the egress TLS origination page now?
No, I'm not seeing. Oh, let me stop sharing.
Yeah.
Okay, see, I'm not seeing anything I can add to the screen.
You can check now.
Okay, now it works. Yes.
Okay.
Awesome.
So yes, as part of this demo, I have tried to club together the three things which I already talked about. Lin, so my screen is fine and it's in the foreground, right?
Yeah, I can see your Istio.io page.
Yeah, okay, that's it. So what I have chosen here is this egress TLS origination example itself. Just thought of showing what is there in the document. So I have already enhanced the document so that it has included a new section of for this mutual TLS origination for egress. This is a newly added section for 1.14, which explains the new steps based on the credential name support, which was done in 1.14. So what I have done in the demo is this particular example, what is there in the document already. I'll just show how it is optimizing the configuration now for the sidecar egress TLS origination. And then maybe at the same time, the same example has workload selector for DR being used. So we can just see how the TLS settings is going only to one of the sidecars and not the other sidecars in the namespace. And then finally, we will see how auto SNI is enabled when the SNI is not set in the DR. Hope my terminal is visible.
Yeah, I can see your terminal.
Okay, so I have put everything in script so that I don't make any mistakes during the live session. So first I'll just, I'm not trying to go through the each step in the script because it's exactly the same steps as what is already documented in the Istio.io page. So whoever has any doubts can go back and refer to the documentation. I have copied the same thing only to the documentation. All I'll show here is the DR configuration part alone. So if you see with 1.14, you'll be able to specify the workload selector like this to match on a specific sidecars in a specific namespace. Also, you can see here that previously in the TLS settings, if you specify a credential name like this, it used to get applied only at the gateways and not at the sidecars. Now with the new feature, if you specify like this, and if you have a workload selector specified like this, it can even go to the sidecars and then configure the TLS settings there. And if usually there will be an SNI here under the TLS settings, if there is a need. But now I have not set the SNI, and then with the configuration, I will show you how the SNI automatically gets set. Yeah, of course, I have added the feature flag called enable auto SNI. Actually, I have not explicitly set it as an environment variable. I have a image built by turning it on by default. But whoever wants to enable it, the information is there in the destination role Istio.io page already. It's documented.
So can you explain what are the modes you support besides mutual?
Yeah, simple and mutual. These are the only cases for which this thing
Okay,
is
so
currently
simple is
done.
TLS, one-way
Yeah,
TLS.
yeah,
Yeah,
one way
gotcha.
TLS and then TLS. Yeah. So sometimes we make mistakes with all these keys and configurations, so I just put everything in the script. Yeah, so I can just show this documentation once again. So this documentation, what in this example, what exactly it does is it has a client where the TLS settings are configured, and then there is an Nginx server which is outside the service mesh, and then we will be trying to show how the Istio configuration helps you originate TLS traffic towards the server. That's what the demo is all about. Yeah, the steps are all mentioned here. How the secret is created, and whoever has already done the sidecar regress will be already familiar with these steps. So the secrets are created, and the only difference is that the secret is created, and now that secret can be applied directly at the sidecar regress using the credential name like this. That's the major difference. In this example, it has SNI specified like this, but I have removed it so that I can show the auto SNI feature also along with the same example. So the configuration is completed. So I have an auto SNI namespace here where there are two pods, HTTP bin pod and sleep pod. I have added a TCP dump pod also to the sleep so that I can show how the auto SNI is properly working with the Wireshark capture. So in the DR, what we have just seen that the DR has a workload selector which says apply the TLS settings only to the sleep pod. So I will just take the proxy config command which displays the secrets. So here you can see that I am displaying the secret that has been configured, yeah, to the sleep pod, and you can see that the client credential secret which I configured has been it's properly configured on the sleep pod. Now, if I
Yeah, that's
change,
a very, by the way, that's very nice because I remember before I can only run that command on the Istio ingress on the gateway,
yeah,
right? But
yeah,
now
correct.
essentially I can run it on the app too.
Yeah. So I have two pods here. Yeah, a second. So this is the HTTP bin pod. Both were in the same namespace. So previously, when we did not have this workload selector support, what you would usually see is when you configure the TLS settings, it will go the same TLS settings will go to both the ports. Now you can see that it's not even gone to the second HTTP bin pod, and only the first sleep pod has the secrets configured. So that is one thing, one optimization which was done. And of course, this covers the two features what I talked about. One is the workload selector, and the second one is the credential name support. Both were coming in the same area. So I just clubbed things together into a single demo. And now for the auto SNI, of course, we have to log into the sleep pod where I have added a TCP dumper Now what I'll do is I'll just start the Wireshark, the TCP dump command I'll start inside the sleep pod. And to here I'll just initiate the curl command to the external Nginx server. You can see that the curl went through. I will just stop the TCP dump in the pod, and then probably I'll just copy the Wireshark or the PCAP file outside of the pod. So it's there in a capture.pcap here. So let me just open it in the Wireshark and okay. So I'll just go straight to the TLS part. So if you see the client hello here, so you have seen that in the DR, I did not have an SNI explicitly set. Previously, we used to set it explicitly so that the SNI extension will come in here. But what you will now see is auto SNI is enabled. So let's see if server name extension is automatically picked up or not. So in the Wireshark, if you see here, yeah, it has already picked up the server name indication extension, and you see the value as the host name in the header. So that's what I hope you're able to see this. So in the TLS header, we can see
Okay,
that
I have a quick
automatically set.
question.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. This is just more for my own sanity understanding. Yeah. Okay, so the auto SNI is, I assume in your environment, you had a environment variable, so you enable auto SNI.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, correct.
And then the auto SNI, that's grabbing the identity of the server side or the client side? Like,
So this,
is your my Nginx is at the server side? Is that right? Your client
yes.
is the sleep.
Yeah, but I'm trying to, from the client, I'm trying to connect to the server, and at that time, it's from the host header, it's picking up this value.
Okay, so this is auto SNI on the server side, because on the client side, the mesh already knows, right? Because it's the identity of the workload based on like your namespace and your service account.
What I have open here is the client hello, if you see. Yeah, so in the client hello request only, I'm showing you the server name set. So the client is basically telling that, okay, I'm trying to connect to this particular host on the server side.
Yeah, so how is the client determine this is the server name? Is that because the request is sent to?
Yeah, it is from
that's what I was missing.
Yeah, okay, from this, if you, where is it? Yeah, I did this curl command, right? If you see here.
Okay, got you.
This is from this, I'm going inside the sleep pod and then doing this curl command.
Like this. Yep. Okay, got you. Yeah, so the auto SNI is the SNI come from the request, which is what you are showing right now. Yeah, makes sense. Okay, cool. Very nice.
Pretty much about the demos. Yeah, of course, it's enabled only with this enable auto SNI feature flag. And yeah, auto SAN validation is also in progress. I think most of the patches are already merged. So that is also something related to this. We will talk about it some other later time. Yeah.
Awesome. With that, thank you. I'm glad your demo goes well. Let me go ahead, share my screen because I like to show some demo too.
Sure.
Awesome. All right. Can you see my screen with two terminal windows? No? Okay. I'm sorry. I forgot.
Right now.
I forgot to add to the stream. Okay. So the first thing I want to show you is in my environment, I already have Istio 1.14 installed. If you watch our episode 20, we teach how you can install Istio using Helm. and particularly using Helm file. So this is, I'm pretty much actually reusing the contents from episode 20, right? What I love about Helm file is you can specify the repository. So it actually goes through like the repository upgrade with you. So you don't have to manually keep your repository updated. So you don't need to run Helm repo upgrade commands. And also you can specify your releases. Like in this case, I specify Istio base and Istio discovery. And also I can specify my Istio discovery needs the base, right? So that's pretty powerful too, to specify, you know, the dependencies. And then I specify, I install Istio ingress gateway, which I also mentioned. It needs Istio base and the Istio discovery here. And then last not the least, I deploy Prometheus stack. And this Helm file also have support for if you specify your values file outside of the Helm file. So that's supported in this example for Prometheus. But if you also look at the Istio discovery, I'm actually specify the value within the Helm file. So it depends on when you have a big values file, you know, you can decide which one to use. So that's that. So as you can see, my environment is up and running. So everything looks good. So the first thing we are going to do is, I'll show you my Istio Cuddle version, which I'm also upgraded to 1.14. There's only one proxy in the data plane. Guess what? That's because it's my Istio ingress gateway, right? So the first thing, I'm going to do is we're going to figure out how to add the minimum protocol version TLS 1.3 to the feature we talked about earlier. So let me go to share my other screens. Sorry, I wish it's easier to share multiple screens. So what I'm going to do is share my screen with this Istio 1.14 changes. So if you see my screen here, right? So we talk about the Istio release highlight. The third highlight is the TLS version. So this document tells me, you know, you go to mesh config and go to your Istio operator and, add in these blocks to your Istio operator. But this is actually not clear to me because now I'm using Helm. So how do I figure out what's the equivalent Helm value? So the first thing I went to is I go to the Helm installation doc, and I was trying to find the example. Unfortunately, there was not an obvious example. So what I end up doing is if I go ahead, share my terminal back, I end up doing is running this Helm commands to help me figure out how to use this. So first of all, I need to figure out where is mesh config so that I can add this minimum TLS version, right? Is this mesh config in the base? Looking at the base. So Helm, what I love about Helm, by the way,
One
yeah.
second. Are you sharing the screen now? But I'm not able to
Yeah,
see that.
sorry, I
Okay.
forgot to add to the stream. Thank you.
Okay.
Hopefully I don't need to split back post. So I just issued a Helm show values Istio /base, right? So that shows me the value of the base charts. And you can see the mesh config which we're looking for is not in here. So the next command I'm going to do is I'm going to run the same command for Istio D because I want to see if it's in the Istio D configuration. So if you scroll down, this looks really promising because it has all the configurations for like CA address, which is mesh config related configuration. So it has proxy configuration. It also have Istio D configuration. Yeah, it has the default resource. it has room. Yes, mesh config is right here. So what I really like about Helm is I don't have to look into Istio.io to figure out what other configuration are available for me. Because when I use Istio operator, I pretty much have to go to Istio API repo to figure out what is the proto for the Istio operator. So with Helm, I can immediately figure out mesh config. How am I going to add that into my Helm file? So with that, what I'm going to do is open up the Helm file I just showed you, and we're going to add this configuration, which I copied over from the Istio.io, from the Istio operator section, but now we're using it to Helm. And why we're putting it here, because it's part of the value configuration, and also because if you look at that Helm show value, mesh config is a parallel configuration as pilot, so this is seems the right home for it. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to apply the change of our Helm file to our environment, right? So the Helm file sync essentially does is push the latest configuration I have in Helm file and then push it to my cluster. So now it's going to refresh everything in my cluster. So switch over to the right side, if I'm doing it right. In the K9S environment, what I want to do is I want to see the config maps, because so one thing this is supposed to do is with this Helm file, it's supposed to open up the Istio installation and open up update the Istio config map and add the minimum configuration for me. So looks like the changes are done. So what I'm going to do is open up the file again. Look, it has the minimum protocol version right here. So that's the change we added to the mesh config through the Helm file I just talked about. So let's test that function. Now that we've applied the minimum protocol configuration of version 1.3 of TLS to my cluster. So in order to test things, the first thing we're going to do is create a namespace called full, and then we're going to deploy HTTP bean and sleep to this namespace. Notice I'm using the manual injection, so I didn't add any label here. But you could potentially use auto injection. So switch to the right side. What we are going to do is, sorry, I didn't switch successfully. Okay, looks, sorry. Okay, so now, sorry about that. I'm learning all these commands, trying to switch back and forth. Okay, so now we want to see is, okay, we do have these two deployed and it's all green, right? So that's all good. The next thing we want to do is we want to test a connection from in the full namespace from the sleep pod to the HTTP bean using TLS 1.3 and open a connection using OpenSSL. So in this case, you can see we were able to connect, right? So you can see the certificate chain, the server certificate, you can see it's connected. So that all looks good. By the way, one thing I want to ask you why we are using Istio proxy instead of sleep here, because Istio proxy has the OpenSSL tooling. So if you use sleep, it probably would fail. Now, the next thing we're going to do is run the exact same command, but we're going to use TLS 1.2 here to see if the connection would go through. So as you can tell, it's connect, but it didn't work, right? Because there's no TLS third presented and third chain handshaking. So it didn't go through. So this is because on the server side, we only allow 1.3 as minimum, TLS 1.3 as the minimum. So it's not going to allow 1.2 of TLS. So how does this work, right? If you remember in Istio.io document, right, port 15006 is all the incoming traffic, right? So if we do a configuration check on the listener of the HTTP bean in the full namespace, and we're checking all the listener of 0000 and capture the inbound port, which is 15006. And let's check if we can see minimum protocol version in that configuration. So we're actually seeing something here, right? So we're seeing 3 of these returns, 1, 2, 3, and they all have within the TLS context of downstream TLS context, all have minimum version of TLS 1.3 and also maximum version. So that is exactly the configuration we push to mesh config, and then mesh config was able to push down to our workloads within the mesh. In this case, it's the HTTP bean. So in case you're wondering, which I was curious too, why there are 3 of this, right? Because there are virtual inbound, with raw buffer. There's also, as transport protocol, there's also virtual inbound with catch-all HTTP. So that's why there are 3 of these. So we talk about how if this works in gateway, right? Yes, it does. If you go to the gateway API, you will see you can config minimum version in gateway. So this is just an addition, nice addition added to the sidecar configuration. Okay, so that's minimum TLS version for Istio workloads within the mesh. The next demo I want to show you is I want to enable access log for the mesh. So the first thing I'm going to do is using the telemetry API, which is a recommended way to enable access logs now, because it's actually so much easier than writing envoy filters in the past, right? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to enable disable access log for the entire mesh, right? Because access log could be pretty chatty, right? Every single request would go through access log, so it could produce a lot of contents. So we're going to disable that because there's no need to enable for everything. But in the meanwhile, we're going to enable access log for the full namespace, which is our playground, right? So in order for you to enable, it's really simple. You just remove disable equals true, because by default, it's enabled. So essentially, we're setting a global configuration to say I'm disable access log, but in the full namespace, we are enabling access log. So with that, I'm going to send a request to from the Istio proxy of the sleep to HTTP bean, right? So switch on the right side. Let's go to HTTP bean. I would expect to see the access log, right? So if you go back again here, you can see the access log did pop in, right? So it did capture the access log. But one thing I stumble with is if you actually go back on the right side, if this works, yes. If you go to the sleep and if you go to Istio proxy, there's actually no logs. If you don't believe me, if you run this command again, it's still no logs. So why is that? If you remember what we did here, right? The command we were typing, it was from Istio proxy to the HTTP bean. So of course there's no logs because the request was from Istio proxy. So if you do switch this to call it from the sleep container, that should generate the access log, right? So when you are debugging issue with access log, this is a particular thing you do want to watch out for. So there's so now we're going to leverage the new feature in 1.14 to enable access log for instance, I only want the access log on the client side or on the server side, or I only want the access log for. So this is highly configurable. Now I'm only config on the client side. So with that, I'm going to, do another curl request from the
So,
sleep.
Lynn,
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
that is the workload mode that was we were
Yes,
seeing.
that's exactly right. That is the workload mode where you specify client server or client and server.
Okay.
Yes. So now you can see I did another request. It did show up in my client. So with that, I'm going to switch back to my HTTP bin, right? So we're going to open up the proxy logs, right? So we're going to, think out, go back here to see, run the request again. So you can see, it didn't log anything on the server side because we especially tell it, on the client side, you log, on the server side, you don't log. So I thought that was pretty interesting to be able to fine tune your access log. So I'm super excited about this feature. I think that's all I have to show. Do you have any questions, Faseela, on this? Let me see if the audience have any questions. It's been pretty quiet today.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to see the workload mode, but you already configured it and showed. I was just about to ask that, but yeah, that's quite good.
Yeah, so essentially, you just run, this is the command I use. I can pull it out again for you. So essentially, the key thing is you just match on the mode of the client. Yeah.
Okay.
So when I build this, I actually made mistake. I always make mistakes. So Istio Analyze was super helpful for me. So
Okay.
I remember I was putting a dash here before match and the analyzer was detecting it. So that's the other thing you want to check, making sure, the analyzer didn't return anything for you. When you use any of the new resources that you're not familiar with, it's very error prone, unfortunately.
Okay. So what are the other modes for this workload mode available? Client and
Yeah,
server?
so there's only 3 modes available: client, server, client, and server.
Okay.
Yeah, and by default it's client and server, which is why when I didn't have this match, it shows the log on both sides.
Okay. So I was expecting it to be something like the workload selector kind of thing with image label match and things like that.
Yeah,
That's why I was not.
that's a good point. I think the key thing is um, how do you know if it's client or server, right? For
Yeah.
destination rule for yours, because destination rule is applied to the client, so it's kind of obvious that workload selector is on the
Yeah.
client. But for something like telemetry, it can go either
Yeah.
way. Yeah, that is why I remember we were in upstream actually debating on the API for quite some time.
Okay.
Awesome. I guess this is fun chatting with you. I want to take a minute to thank you, Faseela, to chat with me today, to teach us about auto SNI, workload selector in destination rule, and also the newly added credential name in destination rule, and go through, some of the new feature of Istio 114 with me. How do folks reach out to you if they have questions for you?
Yeah, so you can reach out to me over the STO Slack channel. I'm available in the same name. So once you search for it, you will definitely get my link. So feel free to ask any questions, or if you need any help with the configuration, whatever doubts you have, feel free to reach out to me. Yeah.
That's awesome. I guess I'll see you definitely often there. So, folks, if this is interesting, please give us a thumbs up and also recommend this to your friends and subscribe our channel. If there's any other topics you would like to see related to Istio, Envoy, eBPF, please let us know, comment. Whether it's on the side or below, definitely let us know. And, happy learning. We hope to see you at the next Hoot episode. Thank you so much for watching. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Faseela.
Thank you
Bye
so
now.
much. Bye.